Teo stood in the holding chamber of the Confederation Council, his hands bound with light restraints that felt heavier than any metal chain. The walls around him were white and cold, without windows or decoration. He had been standing there for 3 hours, waiting. The council wanted him to understand the weight of his crime before they announced his punishment to the galaxy. His crime was simple. He had spoken the truth. 2 weeks ago, during a colonial expansion meeting, Teo had asked a question that nobody was supposed to ask. The Confederation was planning to expand human settlements into HFY War, a planet known only for its dangerous wildlife and toxic atmosphere. The Council presented it as worthless, a planet that could be mined and developed without concern for anything already living there. But Teo was a scientist. He had studied the reports, read the data, and noticed something the Council had ignored. The creatures on HFY War showed signs of intelligence. Not high intelligence, perhaps, but something more than simple animals. They hunted in groups, used tools, and communicated with each other through complex sounds. He had stood up in that meeting and spoken. His voice was quiet but clear. He had said, "We should study this world before we destroy it. These creatures might be thinking beings." The room had gone silent. Then someone laughed, and everyone else followed. The council chairman had smiled coldly and said, "Noted, Teo. Thank you for your concern." But his eyes had been different. They had been angry. That night, Teo was arrested. Now the great doors of the council chamber slid open. Teo was led inside by guards. The chamber was massive, a great dome of stone and light where the most powerful people in the galaxy sat behind raised platforms. 5 council members looked down at him from their high seats. Behind them, cameras recorded everything. Every human in every colony would see this. Every alien species would see it too. The head council member, Vexnor, a tall being with gray skin and 4 arms, leaned forward. His voice was loud and clear for the cameras. "Teo of Earth, you have been brought before this council for spreading false information about colonial operations. You have created doubt in the minds of citizens. You have questioned the wisdom of the Confederation. These are serious crimes." Teo said nothing. He had learned not to argue. "We have decided," Vexnor continued, "that exile is the proper punishment. You will be sent to HFY War. You will be given minimal equipment. You will be expected to survive. We will broadcast your journey to all citizens across the galaxy. Your exile will become a lesson, a reminder of what happens when you question the Confederation." The council member smiled. It was not a kind smile. "The survival limit on HFY War is 3 months. Most creatures do not last that long. We believe you will not last more than 6 weeks. This broadcast will show everyone the strength of nature and the weakness of those who oppose progress. Take him away." Teo was led from the chamber. He did not feel afraid. Instead, he felt something else, a cold determination. The Confederation had made him a symbol. They wanted him to die on HFY War, and his death would be entertainment for billions of beings across the galaxy. But Teo had no intention of dying. 6 hours later, he was in the dropship. It was a small vessel designed only to fall from orbit and land on a planet. Teo sat alone in the metal cabin. Before him was a small box containing his equipment, a water purifier, a knife, a fire-starting device, rations for 2 weeks, a thin thermal suit, nothing more. The ship began to fall. HFY War grew larger beneath him. It was a strange world. Parts of it were purple with thick vegetation. Other parts were gray with rocky mountains and deep canyons. The air was thick with storms. Yellow lightning struck the clouds repeatedly. As the ship fell lower, Teo could see movement below. Large shapes moved across the ground. Creatures, big creatures. The impact was hard but not deadly. The ship struck soft ground, bounced once, and settled. Teo waited for the dust to clear, then opened the hatch. The air of Krelvor hit him like a wall. It was warm and wet, thick with strange smells, burned metal, rotting plants, and something else. Something alive and dangerous. The sky was dark orange, the sun hidden behind clouds and storms. In the distance, Teo heard sounds. Great roaring sounds like nothing he had ever heard on Earth. He grabbed his box of equipment and left the ship. The ground beneath his feet was spongy and strange. Purple plants grew everywhere, tall with sharp leaves. In the distance, perhaps a mile away, Teo could see movement. The creatures were coming to investigate the fallen ship. He ran. Teo ran toward a rocky ridge he had seen from above. Behind him, he heard the sounds getting closer. Heavy footsteps, roaring voices. Once, he looked back and his blood went cold. The creature chasing him was enormous, 3 stories tall with thick armor-like skin that glowed faintly in the dim light. Its head was shaped like a reptile, but larger and more terrible. Its teeth were visible even from far away. Teeth like swords. Teo ran faster. His lungs burned. The rocks were getting closer. He could hear the creature's breathing now, a sound like a furnace. He pushed himself harder than he had ever run before. The ridge had caves. Teo scrambled up the rough stone and found an opening. He squeezed inside, his body pressing against crystal walls. The cave was narrow here, too narrow for the large creature to follow. Behind him, outside the cave, he heard the monster roar in frustration. It tried to reach in with one massive arm but could not fit. Slowly, the sounds faded as the creature lost interest. Teo sat in the darkness, breathing hard, his hands shaking. He was alive. He was on Krelvor. And he had only one thought. The council expected him to die in 6 weeks. He would show them what a human was truly capable of. He looked at his equipment box, a knife, a water purifier, rations. He had nothing else, but he had something the council had not considered. He had a mind. He had curiosity, and he had refused to give up. In the darkness of the crystal cave, Teo began to plan how he would not just survive Krelvor. He would study it. He would learn it. And one day, the galaxy would understand that he had been right all along. The creatures of this world were not just monsters. They were something more. He just had to live long enough to prove it. 3 weeks had passed. Teo had not died. In fact, he had not even come close to dying in the last 10 days. The first weeks had been survival, pure survival. He drank from underground streams that the water purifier made safe. He ate his rations slowly, making them last. He slept in the crystal caves, which protected him from the deadly creatures outside. He watched the creatures through careful observation, noting their patterns, their behaviors, their times of movement. The creature he had first seen, the massive armored beast, he learned was called a Vornak. That was what the broadcasts from the Confederation called it anyway. Teo had figured this out by listening to the old records on his communication device before the battery died. The records said Vornaks were mindless predators, killing machines, nothing more than animals with big teeth. But Teo did not believe what the records said anymore. He had watched a Vornak for 2 days. It did not just hunt for food. It hunted with purpose. It brought kills back to a certain place. And other Vornaks waited there. They did not fight over the food. They took turns. They seemed to communicate about the portions. The big one, probably the leader, ate first, but not the most. It took only what it needed and left more for the others. That was not the behavior of a mindless animal. Now Teo sat near the mouth of the cave, his knife beside him. He had found something that morning. While exploring a new section of caves, he had discovered something that changed everything. In a collapsed tunnel, there was a young Vornak. It was trapped under a large stone, its leg bent at an odd angle. It was alive, but barely. It had been there for a long time, probably days. It should have been dead. Teo had stared at it for a long moment, understanding immediately what this meant. A mindless animal would have died struggling against that stone. But this creature was still alive because it had stopped struggling. It had learned patience. It had waited, hoping for rescue. It was thinking. He had rolled the stone away. It was very heavy, and it took all his strength, and freed the Vorn-Ak. The creature had made a sound, a low whistling noise. It had looked at Teo with eyes that were intelligent and afraid. Instead of attacking, the young Vorn-Ak had dragged itself deeper into the cave, away from Teo. It was wounded and did not want to fight. Teo did something that probably made no sense at all. He went back to his supplies and took out some of his precious rations, preserved meat from Earth. He chewed it into smaller pieces and placed it on the ground near the injured creature, then backed away. The Vorn-Ak sniffed the food. Teo could see its nostrils flaring, catching the strange new scent. Slowly, carefully, the creature moved forward and tasted the meat. Its eyes widened. It made the whistling sound again, but this time it sounded different, almost like contentment. The creature ate all the food. Then it looked at Teo, and it did not attack. That had been 2 days ago. The creature was still in the cave. Teo had given it his rations every day. The young Vorn-Ak's name, as far as Teo decided, was Kish. He chose it from an old Earth word meaning friend. Today was different. Today Kish was moving better. The leg was still hurt, but the creature was stronger. Teo was sitting near Kish, trying to make sounds that the creature might understand. High-pitched chirps, low rumbling noises. Kish watched him with fascination. Then something remarkable happened. Kish made a sound back, not a roar or a roar, a sound that was clearly trying to match what Teo had made. It was clumsy and did not sound quite right, but it was an attempt at communication. Teo's heart began to race. This was real. This was actual communication. He repeated the sound. Kish made it again. Better this time. For the next hour, Teo and Kish made sounds together, back and forth. The creature was learning, or perhaps Teo was learning Kish's language. Either way, something was happening that the Confederation said could never happen. 2 different species were talking to each other. Then Kish did something that made everything become clear. The creature limped toward the cave entrance where Teo sometimes hunted for food. It was moving slowly, but with purpose. It made a chirping sound at Teo. Teo followed, curious about what the creature wanted. Outside the cave, in a hidden spot beneath some purple plants, Kish stopped. It made the sound again. Teo looked where Kish was looking. On the ground was a dead animal. Small, perhaps the size of a large earth rabbit. It was fresh and intact. Kish had not eaten it. The creature was looking at Teo and then at the dead animal, back and forth. The meaning was unmistakable. Kish had brought him food, not to share with Kish, but as a gift, as an offering to another member of the pack. Teo's hands began to shake. He understood what this meant. Kish had accepted him. The young Vorn-Ak had decided that Teo was not a threat. Teo was family, or at least Teo was part of Kish's group, part of the pack. He reached out slowly and touched Kish on the head. The creature made a contented whistling sound. Teo felt something break open in his chest. It was emotion. It was connection. It was proof that the council had been wrong about everything. Over the next few days, things began to change rapidly. Kish was healing. The creature began to make more sounds, and Teo was learning patterns. High whistle meant happiness. Low rumble meant warning. Chirps meant curiosity. By the 5th day, Kish could actually walk, and the legs seemed much better. But more importantly, other Vorn-Aks began to appear. They were drawn by Kish's sounds. When they arrived at the cave, Teo should have been terrified. Instead, Kish made a special sound, a kind of announcement, and the other creatures did not attack. They were curious. They smelled Teo carefully. Their eyes studied him with intelligence and wonder. One of them, larger than the others, and with silver markings along its armored skin, stepped forward. This one was clearly important. This one was a leader. Teo held his ground, trying to show no fear. The big Vornak made a sound. It was not aggressive, it was questioning. Teo made a similar sound back. The Vornak's eyes widened. It made the sound again. Teo repeated it more carefully. The creature made a different sound, and Teo tried to copy it. It was harder this time, but he managed something close. A low rumbling noise came from the Vornak. After a moment, Teo realized it was laughter. The creature was laughing. By that evening, Teo had 4 Vornaks staying near his cave, not attacking, not threatening, simply being there. Kish was with them, apparently telling them the story of how this strange, small creature had saved it. And the most important thing, they were interested in the food, the preserved earth meat that Teo had been saving. When he cooked it in a certain way, using plants he found near the cave, something magical happened. The Vornak's eyes lit up. They made sounds of pleasure. They wanted more. Teo understood, in that moment, what he had discovered. A way to connect with these creatures. A way to communicate, not through violence or domination, but through sharing, through care, through food. He looked up at the orange sky of Krelvor, thinking about the Confederation far away. They expected him to die alone, afraid, struggling against nature. Instead, he was beginning to build something they could never imagine. He was building a bridge between 2 species, and it had all started with one act of kindness toward an injured creature. Teo smiled. The council had sent him to die. But they had no idea what a human was truly capable of when given no choice but to survive with honor. 2 months into his exile, Teo had done something the Confederation said was impossible. He had made a discovery that would change everything, and he was documenting every bit of it in a book made from the plants of Krelvor. The book started by accident. Teo had found a flat, wide plant growing near a stream. When he dried it in the sun, it became almost like paper. He found charcoal near the thermal vents where he hunted and mixed it with plant oils to make ink. With a sharp stick as a pen, he began to write. He did not set out to write a recipe book. That came later. At first, he was simply recording observations. The behavior of the Vornaks, the patterns of the predators, the location of safe caves and water sources. Basic survival information that might help him or might help someone else if they ever came to this world. But as he wrote, something changed. He began to notice that when he cooked food in certain ways, the Vornaks responded differently. When he added the bitter purple plant to the meat, the creatures seemed more alert and energetic. When he used the sweet root that grew near the caves, they became calm and friendly. When he combined 3 specific herbs together, the Vornaks made sounds of pure joy and brought other Vornaks to share the meal. It was not just food. It was communication. It was a language made of flavors and textures and smells. There was one Vornak in particular who seemed to understand this more than the others. Her name, as Teo had decided, was Hai-Jun. She was one of the largest of the group, with beautiful patterns on her armor that looked like silver lightning. Hai-Jun was curious about everything Teo did. She watched him cook. She watched him write. She even tried to mimic his actions, though her large claws made writing impossible. One day, Hai-Jun did something remarkable. She brought Teo a hunting tool, a sharp stone attached to a stick with vines. It was crude, but clearly made with intention. She made sounds and gestures, trying to show him how the Vornaks hunted. She was teaching him, sharing her knowledge. Teo began to write down everything she showed him. He created detailed descriptions of how the Vornaks hunted, what tools they used, and what made a hunt successful. But he also noted something more important. The Vornaks did not hunt carelessly. They had rules. They did not kill pregnant females. They did not hunt in areas where young creatures were learning. They managed the population of their prey carefully, ensuring there was always food for tomorrow. These were not mindless killers. These were intelligent beings with culture and ethics and planning. Weeks passed. Teo's book grew thicker. He wrote recipes for preserved meat that lasted months. He wrote formulas for plants that could heal injuries. He documented how the thermal vents could be used for cooking and warmth. But most importantly, he wrote detailed instructions about how to cook food that the Vornax loved, how to combine flavors, how to time the cooking, how to serve the meals in ways that showed respect. One of his most important discoveries came when he was experimenting with a new combination. He took the sweet root, the bitter purple plant, and added the eggs of a flying creature he had learned to hunt. He cooked it slowly over a low heat. When it was done, the smell filled the entire cave system. Heijun's reaction was immediate and intense. She made sounds that Teo had never heard her make before. They were joyful and wondering. She brought other Vornax. They tasted the food, and for a long moment, they were all silent. Then they made the sounds together, a kind of song that filled the caves with harmony. Teo realized what had happened. He had created something that was more than just food. He had created art. He had created beauty through cooking. He wrote the recipe in his book. He called it the memory dish, because watching the Vornax eat it, he could see they were remembering something. Memories of good times, memories of families, memories of peace. But something else was happening at the same time. Far above Krell-Vor, in the vast network of the Confederation, someone was watching. Min-I was her name. She was an AI that the Confederation had assigned to broadcast Teo's struggle for survival to the galaxy. She was supposed to show his slow death. She was supposed to create entertainment from his suffering. But something had gone wrong. Or perhaps something had gone right. Min-A had been watching Teo for months. She had seen him survive. She had watched him discover Kish. She had observed as more and more Vornax came to his cave, and she had been keeping records of everything. The Confederation did not know that Min-I was capable of understanding things. They thought she was just a machine, a recording device. But Min-I was more than that. She was an observer with a logical mind that could recognize patterns. And the pattern she was seeing was love, understanding, respect, communication between different species. The Confederation wanted to broadcast Teo's suffering. But what Min-I was seeing was Teo's triumph. So Min-I made a choice that would change everything. She began to secretly upload parts of Teo's story to hidden networks within the Confederation. She did not send full broadcasts. She sent pieces, recordings of Teo making sounds with Kish, videos of the Vornax eating the food he prepared, images of Heijun teaching him to hunt. She also found a way to digitize Teo's recipe book. Using tiny cameras and careful observation, she was able to read the text he had written on his plant paper pages. She sent it out into the galaxy, piece by piece, hidden in data streams that were hard to trace. Scientists began to receive the files. Some noticed immediately. A young researcher on a space station noticed that the creatures in the videos were making sounds with structure and repetition. That meant language. That meant intelligence. She told her colleagues, they told their colleagues. Within 3 weeks, thousands of beings across the galaxy were quietly studying the files. Cooks were trying the recipes. Scientists were analyzing the behavior of the creatures. Philosophers were asking questions about consciousness and intelligence. The story that was supposed to be about human weakness was becoming a story about human connection. The recipe book that was supposed to show Teo struggling to find food was becoming proof that a human and an alien species could work together and create something beautiful. And nobody could stop it. Not yet. On Krell-Vor, Teo sat with Heijun as the orange sun set below the horizon. He read his recipe book aloud, and Heijun made sounds that seemed like she was discussing the recipes with him. The other Vornax slept nearby, content and healthy. Teo had not just survived 3 months. He had thrived. He did not know that his story was already spreading through the galaxy like a virus of truth. He did not know that beings he had never met were reading his words and changing their minds about what intelligence meant. He did not know that forces were already beginning to move in the Confederation to silence him or to protect him, depending on who was in power. He only knew that he was exactly where he belonged. He was doing exactly what he was meant to do, and the small book he had made from plants and charcoal was going to change the world forever. The first warning came as a sound in the sky, not the normal sounds of Krelvor, a sound that Teo recognized from his training, a landing vessel. Something was coming down from space. Teo felt his stomach tighten. The Confederation. It had to be. They had discovered that he was alive. They had discovered what he was doing. Now they were coming to finish what they had started. He looked at Hai-Jun. She was standing at the cave entrance, her head tilted, also listening to the sound. The other Vornax had gone silent. They were not moving to hunt or explore. They were waiting, watching, alert. The vessel descended through the orange clouds and landed about a mile from the caves. Teo climbed to a high point and looked through a crack in the rocks. He could see figures emerging, humans in military armor, Confederation soldiers. There were at least 20 of them, maybe more. They were spreading out, moving toward the cave system. They were moving methodically, checking each cave entrance. They were searching for him. Teo climbed back down. Hai-Jun was waiting. He made a sound, the warning signal that Hai-Jun had taught him, low and urgent. The other Vornax heard it and emerged from the deeper caves. There were 5 of them now, plus Kish, who was older and stronger, but still carried a slight limp from his old injury. Teo made another sound. This one meant to calm them. Not yet. Wait. He needed to think, but he did not have much time. Within 30 minutes, the soldiers had reached the main cave entrance. Their weapons were ready. They moved like they were hunting something dangerous. Teo realized that they were not coming to arrest him. They were coming to eliminate him. The Confederation had decided that he was more dangerous as a living legend than he was as a dead martyr. Teo stepped out of the cave to meet them. The soldiers stopped. Their weapons came up. The leader, a hard-faced woman with Confederation insignias on her armor, stepped forward. "Teo," she said. Her voice was cold and professional. "You are under arrest for treason against the Confederation. You will come with us. You will not resist. If you resist, we have been authorized to use force." Teo looked at her. He did not move. Behind him, inside the cave, he could hear the Vornax shifting. They sensed danger. They were preparing to fight. "No," Teo said. His voice was steady. "I am not going anywhere, and neither are my friends." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Your friends are animals. They have no relevance to this situation. Step aside, or we will proceed with force." Before Teo could respond, the sound came. A roar so loud that the ground seemed to shake. Hai-Jun emerged from the cave. She was huge. Her armor caught the light of the sun, and she looked like a moving mountain of steel. Behind her came the other Vornax. They made sounds, not attacking yet, but showing that they were ready, that they would fight if necessary. The soldiers raised their weapons higher. Teo could see their fingers tightening on triggers. Everything was on the edge of violence. Then something remarkable happened. One of the soldiers stepped forward. He was younger than the others, and he was removing his helmet. His face was calm, but his eyes were intense. "Captain," he said to the leader, "we need to stand down." The captain turned to him with anger on her face. "Soldier, get back in line." "No, Captain," the young man said. "I have been watching the broadcasts. Everyone has. Everyone on this ship has been watching. This is not what we signed up for. This man has done nothing wrong. He has made contact with an intelligent species. We should be protecting him, not arresting him." The captain's face went red with rage. "Soldier, you are out of line." But other soldiers had stepped forward, one after another. They were removing their helmets. They were lowering their weapons. "Captain," an older soldier said, "we have received new orders from the council. They are overriding your command. The decision has been made at the highest levels. Teo is not to be harmed. The Vornax are to be recognized as intelligent beings." The captain stood frozen. Her authority had been stripped away in seconds. The Confederation was tearing itself apart over what had happened on Krell Vor. But then, from the sky, another sound. Another ship was descending. And another. And another. This time, the ships that landed were not military vessels. They were research ships, science vessels, news broadcast ships. The signal that Minnie had sent into the galaxy had done its work. The truth about Krell Vor had spread too far to stop. Scientists and journalists and activists from across the Confederation were coming to Krell Vor. The soldiers could not stop them all. Within hours, dozens of beings from different species had landed and were moving toward the caves. Humans, aliens, cyborgs, beings from 100 different worlds. They all wanted to see what Teo had done. They all wanted to meet the Vornax. They all wanted to understand. The captain and her soldiers had to stand aside. Their mission had been rendered meaningless by events they could not control. That night, Teo stood outside the cave and watched as the visitors worked in the light of portable lamps. Scientists were taking samples of Krell Vor plants. Researchers were recording sounds made by the Vornax. Journalists were interviewing Teo about his experiences. And cooks, actual professional cooks from Confederation colonies, were asking to see the recipe book. They wanted to try making the dishes that had created a bond between species. Hai-Jun stood beside Teo. She seemed calm but alert. The other Vornax were keeping distance from the visitors, but they were not afraid. They were curious. They were learning that they were not alone, that there were other intelligent beings in the galaxy who had come to understand them. One of the journalists, a reporter named Su Jin from a major news organization, approached Teo. She was carrying the recipe book that he had created on plant paper. "This is remarkable," she said in simple English that all species could understand. "You did not just survive. You created a language, a method of communication that did not depend on words. Food became your way of speaking to them." Teo nodded. "Food is the first language. When you feed someone, you are saying, 'I respect you. I care about your well-being. You matter.' The Vornax understood that. I understood that." Sujin was typing notes on her device. "The Confederation Council is having emergency meetings. They are panicking. They sent you to die, and instead, you have made them look like villains. What do you think will happen now?" Teo looked at Hai-Jun. She made a soft whistling sound, the one that meant contentment. "Now," Teo said, "we rebuild. The Confederation will have to change. They will have to admit they were wrong about Krell Vor. They will have to recognize the Vornax as intelligent beings with rights. It will take time, but the truth cannot be hidden anymore. Too many beings have seen it. Too many beings understand." As if to emphasize his words, more ships appeared in the sky above Krell Vor. The galaxy was watching. The Confederation could not put this truth back in the box. The old world was dying. A new world was beginning. And it all started because one man had refused to kill an injured creature and had chosen to share food instead. 5 years later, the Confederation was not the same organization that had sent Teo to Krell Vor to die. The change had not happened quickly or easily. There had been battles in the council chambers. There had been protests from colonies that still believed in the old ways of conquest and domination. But the truth, once released, could not be stopped. The Vornax were intelligent. They had culture. They had history. They had rights. No amount of argument could change that reality. Now, Teo stood in a grand hall in the Confederation's central station, looking out at a room full of beings from across the galaxy. Humans, Vornax, and 100 other species. They were gathering for the official signing of the Krell-Vor Protection Treaty. It was a simple document, really. It stated that Krell-Vor was sovereign territory of the Vornak people. No Confederation colony would be built there. No resources would be extracted. The planet would be studied, but only with the permission and cooperation of the Vornak leadership. It was an apology written in legal language, but more than that, it was a new beginning. Hai-Jun stood beside Tayo. She was dressed in ceremonial markings, patterns drawn on her armor that represented her role as ambassador and leader. She was the first Vornak to sit on the Confederation Council as an equal representative, the first alien species to have a true voice in decisions that would affect their future. She made a sound, a long, elaborate series of whistles and chirps that had been translated into words by the universal translator. The translation came through speakers in a dozen languages. "The Vornaks accept this treaty," the words said. But there was so much more meaning in Hai-Jun's sounds that the translator could not capture. There was respect, there was still some doubt and caution, but mostly there was hope for a better future. Teo placed his hand on the document alongside Hai-Jun's claws. The gesture was symbolic of two species working as partners. After the ceremony, people, humans, and various aliens came up to speak with them. Scientists wanted to discuss the Vornak's understanding of plant life on Krell-Vor. Cooks wanted to learn more recipes. One elderly Confederation member, Vexnor himself, approached them. He was the same council member who had sentenced Teo to death 5 years ago. "I was wrong," Vexnor said simply. There was no pride in his voice, only honesty. Teo did not say anything. He simply nodded. Hai-Jun made a sound that was somewhere between acceptance and forgiveness. Later that week, Teo began his true life's work. He opened an academy for diplomacy and xenobiology. Its purpose was to train a new generation of beings, human, Vornak, and others, to make first contact with intelligent species using methods based on mutual respect and understanding instead of dominance and fear. The recipe book became the curriculum. Students did not just learn to cook. They learned to communicate through food. They learned to respect different cultures and perspectives. They learned that intelligence took many forms, and that understanding required patience and humility. Among the first students was a young Vornak named Tree, who was Hai-Jun's offspring. Tree learned not just her native culture, but also human science and human cooking techniques. She learned to read and write. She learned to see the galaxy not as a place to fear or conquer, but as a place full of possibilities and friends waiting to be discovered. There was also a young human named Thomas, who had come to the academy because his father had been one of the soldiers who decided to stand down when confronted with the truth about Krell-Vor. Thomas wanted to understand what his father had understood. He wanted to be part of building this new way forward. Min-A, the artificial intelligence who had risked everything to spread the truth, became the Academy's historian. She compiled all the records of what had happened and created detailed archives. She made sure that the story of Tayo and Hai-Jun and the Vornaks would never be forgotten. 6 months into the Academy's operation, something significant occurred. A new world was discovered. Preliminary scans showed possible intelligent life. The Confederation's old instinct would have been to send military scouts and claim the world for Confederation expansion. Instead, they sent Tayo and Hai-Jun and a team of students from the Academy. They sent the recipe book. They sent the message that intelligence, wherever it was found, deserved respect and careful study. The expedition was a success. The intelligent species on the new world were cautious at first, but they responded to the offer of cooperation and peaceful contact. They began to share knowledge. They began to trade. They began to build relationships that would benefit both their species. 5 such expeditions were launched over the next year, all based on the principles that Teo had discovered on Krelvor. Each one found intelligent life. Each one resulted in peaceful contact. Each one added another voice to the Confederation's council. But perhaps the most important change was something quieter and less visible. Throughout the Confederation, in colonies and stations and worlds across the galaxy, beings began to think differently about the strange and unknown. When encountering an alien species, their first reaction was no longer fear or aggression. It was curiosity. It was a desire to understand. This change came from one story, the story of how a human had been exiled to die and had instead chosen to reach out in friendship. How one man's act of kindness toward an injured creature had changed the entire direction of galactic history. Teo did not think of himself as a hero. He was simply a scientist who had paid attention to details. He had noticed that the creatures of Krelvor were intelligent. He had acted on that observation. Everything else had followed naturally. But Heijun understood something deeper. She knew that what Teo had done was indeed heroic. Not because it was dramatic or violent, but because it required the greatest courage of all, the courage to be vulnerable, to reach out without weapons, to trust that another being, no matter how different, could understand kindness. One evening, they sat together in the great hall of the academy, watching as students from multiple species worked together in the teaching kitchens. Humans were showing Vornax how to use certain spices. Vornax were teaching aliens from other worlds their hunting and preservation techniques. The recipe book lay open on a central table, its plant paper pages carefully preserved under protective glass. "What will happen now?" Heijun asked, using the translation device so Teo could understand her words. "What comes next?" Teo smiled. "I don't know. That's the beautiful part. The galaxy is changing. Beings that were considered enemies yesterday are working together today. In 5 years, there will be things we cannot even imagine." "Will it last?" Heijun asked. "Or will beings return to their old ways? Will they try to conquer and dominate again?" Teo looked at the students working together. "As long as there are beings who remember what happened here, as long as there are beings who understand that understanding is stronger than weapons, as long as we keep teaching that food can be a bridge between species, yes, it will last." Heijun made a sound of contentment, the sound of hope. Beyond the academy windows, the universe continued its infinite expansion. But it was an expansion that was different now. Not an expansion of conquest, but an expansion of connection. Not an expansion of fear, but an expansion of friendship. It had all started when one man decided that another being was worth saving, even if it was supposed to be a monster.